Hey everybody, Dave here. A quick reminder that in addition to the CyberWire podcasts that you know and love, we also publish our CyberWire Daily News Brief. It's got all the day's cybersecurity news and stories, much more than we can fit in our daily podcast. It's free, and you can check it out and sign up to have it delivered to your inbox every day when you visit our website, thecyberwire.com. That's our CyberWire Daily News Brief. Do check it out. A terror attack against 2 New Zealand mosques is announced on Twitter and live-streamed on Facebook. A new unobtrusive JavaScript sniffer infests some e-commerce sites in the UK and the US. Cryptojacking finds its way into the cloud. A look at the consequences of regulation, both good and bad. How CISOs will have to grapple with the increasingly pervasive Internet of Things. And China's National People's Congress makes a gesture toward respecting IP, but the world remains skeptical. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Observit. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys. Your employees, contractors, and privileged users. In fact, a whopping 60% of online attacks today are carried out by insiders. Can you afford to ignore this real and growing threat? With Observit, you don't have to. See, most security tools only analyze computer, network, or system data. But to stop insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by enabling your security team to detect risky activity, investigate in minutes, effectively respond, and stop data loss. Want to see it in action for yourself? Try Observit for free. No installation required. Go to observit.com/cyberwire. That's observit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observit for sponsoring our show. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Friday, March 15, 2019. 49 people are dead in Christchurch, New Zealand, as anti-Muslim terrorists shot up 2 mosques during Friday prayers. Police have made 4 arrests. Intent to carry out the massacre was announced online shortly before the murders began. A manifesto seeking the sadly familiar goals of terror and depraved inspiration, also linked to a shooter's Facebook page, where some 17 minutes of the massacre were subsequently live-streamed. It was apparently taken by a camera worn by the shooter, and it included the shooter's own repellent commentary offered as he gunned down worshippers. Of the 4 arrests, police have charged 1 man with murder, released another after concluding he wasn't involved in the attacks, and continue to investigate the other 2. The inquiry continues amid widespread condemnation of the attacks. The video has been taken down, and authorities urge anyone who may have it to refrain from sharing. Researchers at security firm Group IB late yesterday reported that 7 online stores, based in the UK and the US, were infected with a new and evasive JavaScript sniffer that Group IB calls GMO. They first discovered the malware on sporting goods site Fila UK. AT&T's Alien Labs have a report out on how cryptojacking has, like so much legitimate commerce, moved into the cloud. The infestations have come in a variety of ways. Some pests are compromising open APIs and unauthenticated management interfaces in order to get into container management platforms. Others have gone after control panels of web hosting solutions. AT&T's Alien Labs blog has advice on how to recognize such attempts and a list of indicators of compromise. So here's a question. Does regulation have a downside? That's one of the issues that was under discussion at the Johns Hopkins University's annual Cybersecurity Conference for Executives Wednesday. Regulation's promised upside is clear enough. It's an analog of public health and public safety measures transposed to cyberspace. And the usual complaints about regulation: it can stifle legitimate trade, it can be an indirect form of patronage and rent-seeking, it can be poorly designed. Well, those are also obvious enough. In a keynote that opened the proceedings in Baltimore this week, Dr. Phyllis Schneck, managing director of the Global Cyber Solutions Practice at Promontory Financial Group, began by drawing attention to the well-known principle that compliance isn't sufficient for security, still less synonymous with it. And one problem with regulation is that compliance can lead to unjustified complacency. But she went on to outline some of the less obvious downsides and upsides. Schneck offered regulation of personally identifiable information, PII, as an example of regulatory insufficiency. PII is widely regulated, but there's a wealth of other types of data that aren't, and which, when aggregated, can be at least as revelatory as what we commonly think of as PII. Information such as location data and buying habits, for example, can be just as valuable to an attacker as it is to the companies that collect the data. One of the problems with regulation, she said, is that it shows the bad guys what you're not doing, so they can invest their time and money into targeting areas that are unprotected. Attackers will always be ahead because defenders have laws that restrict their actions. Attackers can adapt more quickly to new information, and they're generally more open to sharing information with other attackers. Operational resilience is the only way to address this problem, Schneck argued. Companies need to have their recovery strategies set up in advance. She stressed that rehearsal is a necessary component of resilience. Companies need to ask themselves what they would do if all the lights went out tomorrow, so that they're not dealing with that question when the lights actually do go out. John Forte, Deputy Executive for Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory's Homeland Protection Mission Area, delivered the closing keynote. He spoke to the proliferation of interconnected devices. Transportation, healthcare, buildings and cities, education, public safety are increasingly automated, and CISOs are going to need to deal with that trend soon. IoT devices will be used to assist in countless tasks, and all of these devices need to interact with each other. The challenge is getting them to interact securely and building them so they can't be hacked. Forte said that the traditional consideration for a CISO is aligning the risk to the mission. In the future, however, CISOs will increasingly need to become business strategists. What CISOs need to start doing today is designing open, resilient, zero-trust architectures, mastering the supply chain, and enhancing automation and the use of AI. Forte noted that we're currently in the very beginning stages of artificial intelligence. Agence France-Presse reports that China's National People's Congress has approved a law said to be intended to inhibit government agencies from forcing foreign companies to give proprietary technology to their Chinese partners in joint ventures. The bill also makes a gesture in the direction of establishing mechanisms for adjudicating disputes over intellectual property among Chinese and international partners. The measure is widely seen as a peaceful gesture in the direction of Washington as Sino-American trade negotiations enter what appears to be their endgame. But few observers think the law will have much of an effect on Chinese conduct with respect to intellectual property. While the American Chamber of Commerce in China did say that the last-minute efforts are appreciated, it also regretted that the new law addresses just a small slice of the overall set of concerns our members have about the uneven playing field foreign companies encounter in China. On balance, that seems to be the international reaction. Too many loopholes and uncertainties remain for those who would do business in China. Perhaps it's the thought that counts. Agence France-Presse, by the way, helpfully, if sourly, calls the National People's Congress China's rubber stamp parliament. The vote in the National People's Congress was 2,929 for it, 8 against it, and 8 with nothing to say. That's a pretty big rubber stamp. Must need quite a stamp pad. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Observit. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys. Your employees, contractors, and privileged users. In fact, a whopping 60% of online attacks today are carried out by insiders. Can you afford to ignore this real and growing threat? With Observit, you don't have to. See, most security tools only analyze computer, network, or system data. But to stop insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by enabling your security team to detect risky activity, investigate in minutes, effectively respond, and stop data loss. Want to see it in action for yourself? Try Observit for free. No installation required. Go to observit.com/cyberwire. That's observit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observit for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Craig Williams. He's the director of Talos Outreach at Cisco. Craig, great to have you back. I wanted to check in with you this time about where we stand when it comes to crypto miners.
Well, so, one of the things that we always suspected is that, as the cryptocurrency markets continued to soften, a lot like the other economies, that we were going to see some sort of impact in the behavior of the attackers using that as a preferred payload. And so we looked in our telemetry. Obviously, we have telemetry from our customers who decide to opt in. And funnily enough, I made a fun mistake. I noticed a little bit of a dip in November. And so I talked to Nick, and Nick and I were talking about the theory, and we agreed that, hey, yeah, there could be something to this. Let's dive in.
And?
Well, it turned out the day I was looking at was Thanksgiving. So for those of you outside of the United States, that's when we all quit work and go eat turkey for a while.
I think we may have just gotten a little glimpse in your personal life there as well, Craig.
Yeah. And so it turned out that we were able to prove that, yes, the tiny little window I saw absolutely happened.
All right.
But when you looked at it from an overall perspective, that was really just a temporary dip. So in fact, we basically confirmed the opposite of our theory. Not only is cryptocurrency mining continuing relatively steady, previous infections are also being maintained.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen stories recently about how on the legitimate mining side of things, some of the graphics cards manufacturers have been lowering their forecast expectations for earnings, in large part because of the dip in the profitability of mining.
Absolutely. And so, naturally, I think it's normal to assume that, hey, maybe that will carry over into the, threat landscape.
Yeah.
But I think what we were able to determine was that because the risk is so low and, the barrier to entry is zero because the kits are just out there littering the internet, that it doesn't matter how low the price goes. Until there's something that's even lower risk with a good payout, people are going to continue using these tools for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that, I guess, as far as these things go, this one can have a low impact on the end users. Lots of folks have crypto mining going on and might not even know that it's happening.
Well, so that's an interesting discussion. I'm glad you brought that up. So, yeah, I've heard that argument a lot, and I think there is a kernel of truth to it, right?
Yeah.
If you have cryptocurrency mining going on, well, your network's not going to go down immediately. Your data is not going to be held hostage.
Right.
And you can probably carry on with business as usual for a while. The big flashing red lights need to be, if you have cryptocurrency mining on your network, that's just what you're aware of, right? You've left the door unlocked somewhere and you know that people are going through it. Maybe you know what one person who went through the door is doing. Maybe they're crypto mining quietly in the corner, but you have no idea who else has come through that door and what data has gone out that door. And so I think while it's true that the crypto mining itself is not that damaging, right? And yes, sure, there's some power loss and maybe slightly higher expenses around that. But I think the real risk is that the door's open and any attacker who wants and can find it can come through that door and cause additional damage.
Sort of a canary in the coal mine, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, good insights as always. Craig Williams, thanks for joining us. Now I'd like to share some words about our sponsor, Cylance. AI stands for artificial intelligence, of course, but nowadays it also means all image or anthropomorphized incredibly. There's a serious reality under the hype, but it can be difficult to see through to it. As the experts at Cylance will tell you, AI isn't a self-aware Skynet ready to send in the Terminators. It's a tool that trains on data to develop useful algorithms. And like all tools, it can be used for good or evil. If you'd like to learn more about how AI is being weaponized and what you can do about it, visit threatvector.cylance.com and check out their report, Security Using AI for Evil. That's threatvector.cylance.com. We're happy to say that their products protect our systems here at the CyberWire, and we thank Cylance for sponsoring our show. My guest today is Nirmal John. He's a journalist living in India and author of the book Breach: Remarkable Stories of Espionage and Data Theft and the Fight to Keep Secrets Safe.
Dave, I think one of the fundamental problems we have right across the world, frankly, is the gap in knowledge between and awareness, frankly, between the people who are in the cybersecurity business and the normal person on the street. I think that particular issue is a little more acute in India because of the fact that you have got hundreds of millions of people who are coming on board onto the digital bandwagon for the first time. And these are people who do not have any reference point when it comes to the idea of digital security.
Can you give us an idea? What is the situation that folks find themselves there in India when it comes to cybersecurity and protecting themselves?
There are 2 or 3 different strands to this question. One is in the context of corporates, right? In that context, I think one of the things that I've tried to bring out in the book, and this is primarily aimed at that kind of a audience, what I've tried to bring out is the fact that it is individual mistakes often that lead into breaches. It is silly things like sharing of passwords, for example, or clicking on the wrong link, which starts a domino of things happening in the background. The other thing, as a larger view, is the fact that a lot of these instances can actually come down through simple awareness programs. Frankly, I think there are people who are making mistakes. Those are the silly kind of mistakes where you click on something, divulge numbers to the bank account numbers and bank pins, ATM pins, and all that to people who call. It's mostly low-level stuff that's happening right now, and that is what is worrying about. As I said, when you have about hundreds of millions of people who are coming on board onto the digital world, it is the low-level stuff that's actually creating much of the issue.
Now, as you're getting feedback on the book, as people are reading it, are there any of the stories that they're coming back to you and they're saying, "Wow, this was a particularly remarkable one"?
Yes, I think one of the stories that I've narrated in fact, the first chapter itself is of a top Indian businessman. He's one of India's richest men, and he's a very powerful man. And this guy was, with the victim of a phishing email back in 2011. The fact that somebody as powerful as him could be with the victim of something like that, I think that itself shows the gravity of the situation, right? And I think that's the feedback that I got when I told people when people came back to me about after reading the book, some of these instances and some of the simplicity of the ways in which the breaches happened. That's something that stood out for most people.
Are there any things in particular about India that you find unique to that country, to that part of the world, that might be different from what we're used to here in the United States?
I think broadly, notions of things like privacy, we have I think culturally a different kind of makeup and an outlook on things like that. And that has a direct impact on cybersecurity. I think there is a culture of sharing, which is a little more overt compared to countries in the West. The more information that is out there, the easier it is for people for malicious actors to capitalize on it, right? So I think one of the fundamental issues is our willingness to overshare. The center of the cybercrime universe has been other countries over the years, but I think as India grows further and as the population becomes more and more digitized, I think there would be crimes and is actually in fact taking off in a big way. I mean, the sheer numbers, right? I mean, 1.2 billion people in a country. That itself gives those who have malicious intentions, a great market. What is especially worrying is the fact that this is a market where awareness is low. So that's a great combination, right? While the ticket sizes themselves, say in a banking heist, might be smaller, the fact that it's easier work for malicious actors. I think that is something that stands out for me in India.
What do you hope people take away from the book? Folks who've read it, what are some of the lessons you want them to take from it?
One of the fundamental things that I want people to take away is that it could happen to you. I think we in India, we often think that bad things happen to somebody else. And therefore, there is a reluctance to take responsibility and invest in whether it's in terms of training, an organization, or in terms of building the right technology to protect yourself. I think I want people to be a little more skeptical. I think a little more skepticism in how they interact with the digital world around them would go a long way.
That's Nirmal John. He's a journalist and author of the book Breach: Remarkable Stories of Espionage and Data Theft and the Fight to Keep Secrets Safe. And that's the CyberWire. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of DataTribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our CyberWire editor is John Petrick, social media editor Jennifer Iben, technical editor Chris Russell, executive editor Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.